Stop hogging it, bro, I said to my friend David, who was puffing hard on the Newport dangling from his mouth. David and I have been friends since we were in the 6th grade. He's currently dating my sister, which I don't approve of. I feel like ever since they started seeing each other 6 months ago, their relationship always comes before our friendship. I snatched the cigarette, took a few quick puffs, and then passed it to Matt. I'd met Matt 3 years ago when he moved here from Florida, after his parents got divorced. He was quiet and laid back, but he hasn't been the same since his brother died. Now he's always sad and depressed, and he spends all of his time trying to make his mom happy. The 3 of us were all seniors this year. I couldn't wait to graduate and get the hell out of this town. I planned on going to college in California. My mom was upset about me going so far away, but she was proud of me too. Even though I skipped school from time to time, I was still a straight-A student. I couldn't say the same for David or Matt, because David was actually supposed to graduate last year, but he got held back. And Matt was in jeopardy of not graduating this year because he was flunking 2 classes. It was 5th period, and I was supposed to be in Mr. Klein's algebra class, but instead we were skipping. Mr. Klein was a cool teacher, but algebra was extremely boring. He just returned from taking some time off. His daughter had leukemia, and she ended up passing away after battling it for many years. I didn't really know her very well, but I went to the funeral along with many other students and teachers. Mr. Klein was so heartbroken. She was his only child. "Where's the key?" Matt asked. He was going to be pissed because I dropped it into the dirty mop bucket behind me. Matt's mom was dating one of the janitors, so it was pretty easy for him to steal the key to the janitor's closet on a regular basis. "Don't kill me, man, but I dropped it. In there," I said, pointing to the bucket filled with gray, dingy water. "Well, go get it," he demanded. No way in hell was I sticking my hand in that disgusting water. I checked my watch to see how much time was left until next period. I had English 6th period, and no way was I missing that. I could care less about English. I liked the class because my teacher, Miss Weaver, is hot. Suddenly we heard a high-pitched squeal. Then Principal Graham's voice flooded the loudspeaker in the hallways.
"This is not a drill. We have an active threat inside the school. Proceed with lockdown protocols immediately. Stay in your classrooms. I repeat, this is not a drill."
Matt was the first one to go into panic mode. "Hurry up! We have to find the key and get back to class before they lock us out," he exclaimed as he plunged his hand into the filthy mop bucket. Once he pulled the key out, he swiftly jabbed it into the keyhole, but I grabbed his hand before he could turn the key in the lock. "Wait a second. Do you really think it's a good idea for us to go out there? We're probably safer here than in any classroom," I explained to him. "We just have to stay quiet. Nobody will ever know we're in here," I said. But he wasn't listening to me. Matt already had the door halfway open. "Just let him go," David told me as he desperately tried to get through to 911. Matt darted down the hall. Then I closed the door as I heard his footsteps fade away in the distance. "Hello? Yes, there's been a shooting at my school," David told the 911 operator. "We don't know if it's a shooting," I whispered to him. He shushed me. I pulled out my cell phone to text my mom. She was at work, so she probably wouldn't get my message until later. I was picturing all of the times I'd seen videos on YouTube or the news of parents waiting outside of the school after there'd been a shooting, waiting to hear if they were one of the lucky ones that would go home with their kid that night. I wanted her to know how much I loved her, just in case something bad happened to me. But as I began to text, I heard noises right outside the door. I frantically waved my arm around, trying to get David's attention. He quickly hung up, and we both silenced our phones. I rushed to finish the text to my mom. I hoped she could understand what I was trying to say, because I'm pretty sure there were some spelling errors. David began texting a message to someone on his phone, and a moment later I received a text from him. It said, "I think we need to get out of here. If they find us, there's absolutely nowhere for us to hide in this tiny-ass closet. We're sitting ducks in here." I thought about what he said for a minute, and I guess he was right. But we had no idea where the gunman was. For all we knew, he could be lurking right outside, waiting for us. David volunteered to peek outside to see if the coast was clear. I gladly stepped aside, handed him the key, and moved to the back of the closet so that he could get past. He cautiously and quietly pulled the door open, just wide enough for his head to peek around. He glanced back and whispered, "I don't see anything." I whispered back for him to wait a few minutes. When he peeked back out, it was still empty, so we emerged into the hallway and gently closed the door behind us. My heart was pounding out of my chest. I don't think I've ever been so afraid in my life. You hear about this kind of thing on the news all of the time, but you never think it would happen to you. I'm sure that's what every single person that it has happened to used to say. David and I inched our way along the lockers. I turned around and whispered to him to keep an eye out for Matt. I hoped he had made it somewhere safe, but if there's one thing I can say about Matt, it's that he's careless. As we reached the end of the hallway, I heard an explosion of screams coming from one of the classrooms. I motioned to David to go back to the closet. Then suddenly, one of the classroom doors burst open. It was the door to my algebra teacher, Mr. Klein's class. He ran into the hallway and the door slammed behind him. He fell to the floor crying and begging for his life. I heard footsteps approaching him, and when I peeked around the corner, I could see a bloody trail leading away from his classroom. He managed to choke out the words,
"Please, why are you doing this? I love you, sweetheart."
while coughing up his own blood. Loud whispers flooded the halls. The next thing I knew, his lifeless body was being flung down the hallway like a rag doll, and he slammed into the lockers with tremendous force, causing them to vibrate. The sound of the lockers rattling due to the force sent chills up my spine. He had a huge gaping hole right in the middle of his chest. I almost regurgitated my lunch when I saw the white meat and bone fragments protruding from it. The lights flickered, and then I felt an enormous gust of wind. I ran over to Mr. Klein to see if he was okay, but there was nothing I could do to save him. He bled to death right there in front of me. I darted back down the hall and banged on his classroom door with the hopes that someone would open it and let me in. But all I heard was silence. I knew he had a class right now, because I was supposed to be in there. He must have taken everyone to the back of the room, to the closet, where he kept all of the extra textbooks and other supplies. I started heading back to the janitor's closet to find David. I was nearly there when the banging began. It was deafening. I turned around to see where it was coming from and saw bloody handprints on almost every locker. They only lingered for a few seconds before disappearing. I finally reached the janitor's closet and knocked on the door. "David, it's me." Whatever was making the banging sounds was getting closer. "Open the goddamn door!" I yelled, while twisting the knob back and forth. When I realized he wasn't going to open it, I bolted down the hallway and upstairs to the library. As I entered, I noticed backpacks, coats, and other belongings that had been left behind. The library seemed to be deserted, but you could never be too careful, so I grabbed a letter opener I found on the librarian's desk and inspected it for myself. I had searched the entire library except the one aisle in the back. When I headed to the back aisle, I started to hear breathing. I was ready to stab somebody if I had to. I crept closer and closer, and just as I was about to peek my head around the last aisle... "Holy shit, I nearly took your head off. What are you doing here?" Matt asked me while wielding a chair. "I thought it was the shooter," I told him, relieved. He told me that after he had left me and David in the janitor's closet, he knocked on numerous doors, but nobody would let him in. So he headed up here to hide. "Where's David?" he asked me. "I don't know. We got separated," I said. Then I told him that I witnessed Mr. Klein being murdered. "Did you see the shooter?" Matt curiously asked. "Wait, don't tell me. Is it Lonely Larry from Home Ec? I knew he would end up doing something like this one day," he said. "No, that's the thing. Some weird shit is going on around here. "Have you heard even one gunshot?" I asked him. He thought about it for a second, then replied, "No." "So wait, does Larry have a knife or something?" he questioned. "No, damn it, it's not Larry," I said, annoyed. "Well, I don't think it is," I added. "Look, we need to get out of here." He agreed as he looked out one of the windows. The school parking lot was covered with police and pedestrians, probably worried parents waiting for news about their kids. "Where can we go?" Matt asked as I walked toward the door. "Maybe we should just hide in here and wait for the police to find us," he suggested. I peeked out of the blinds covering the window. It was dark and dreary out, almost like an eclipse, which didn't make any sense. It had been nice and sunny when I got on the bus this morning. It's like Mother Nature knew this was going to happen today. My eyes drifted back to the parking lot. "Does it look like they are coming in here anytime soon?" I asked him. He reluctantly followed me out into the hall. It was dead silent. You could hear a pin drop. I was just about to turn the corner at the bottom of the stairs when I noticed Matt was still standing at the top of the stairway. "What are you doing? Come on!" I loudly whispered up at him. He wasn't paying attention to what I was saying. He was looking at something, standing next to him. "I didn't take your iPad," he shouted, clearly talking to someone, but it wasn't me. "Look, sackface, you probably sold it for drugs and don't remember," he said accusingly. I immediately recognized the nickname when he said it. Matt used to call his older brother Travis that name all of the time. I hadn't heard him say it in 2 years. That's when Travis committed suicide. Travis had stayed behind while Matt and his mom were away on vacation. They discovered his body when they returned, hanging from the banister at the top of the staircase. He didn't leave behind a note or anything, so everyone was stunned as to why he did it. From my hiding place around the corner, all I could see was a shadow behind Matt. He glanced in my direction for a second, and that's when I vaguely saw the shadow, of 4 gigantic tentacle-like arms waving wildly in the air. Then a second later, Matt came tumbling down the stairs toward me. He landed at the bottom with a thud, and then I swear I heard laughing. I backed up some more, making sure I was out of sight. "Matt, are you all right?" I whispered, still staring up at the top of the stairs. The shadow was gone. When my eyes rested back on Matt, my brain couldn't comprehend what I was seeing. But then I realized that his head was twisted completely around. There was nothing but hair where his face should be. His neck was clearly broken. I stared up at the top of the stairs one more time and saw what appeared to be the words, "I'm hungry," written on the wall, in blood. I dashed away. On my way back down the hall, I removed the axe located next to the fire alarm to use for protection. Then I banged on the door to the janitor's closet again. There was still no answer, so I assumed David had found a new hiding place. When I made it to the basement, I texted him to find out where he was. I received a text back when I was entering the boiler room. "I'm in the basement," it said. I called his name, but he didn't come out. I gripped the axe so tightly that my hands began to blister. I continued to call out David's name the entire time I searched the basement. There were loud noises happening all around me, coming from all directions. I could hear the sound of water dripping from somewhere. I wasn't surprised. The janitors are always moaning about having to repair this leak or that leak. Steam coming from the boiler spread throughout the room, making it hard for me to see. I quickly rubbed my eyes, then headed to the back of the basement to try to find an exit. As I got to the very back of the boiler room, I saw bright red lights glowing at the top of what appeared to be a door. I pushed on the release latch and was prepared to emerge into the back parking lot of the school, but the door didn't budge. I tried numerous times, but still got the same result. Then something stopped me right in my tracks. I heard someone calling my name. I hardly heard it with all of the noise, because it was barely above a whisper. I assumed it was David, so I called out his name as well. But as I listened closer, I didn't recognize the voice. Well, maybe I did, but it couldn't be. I wiped sweat from my brow and got ready to swing the axe, hoping that it wasn't actually David and I ended up chopping his head clean off. As I began circling around the boiler, trying to make my way back to the stairs, I heard footsteps. Now it sounded like whoever was down here with me was heading in the same direction that I was. When I'd called out David's name, he never answered me back, so I knew it wasn't him. Every time I stopped walking, the footsteps stopped too. I was trembling with fear. I noticed something glistening in the darkness. I picked it up and upon examination saw that it was a screw. Thinking that it may distract my stalker, I chucked it toward the back of the boiler room at the exit door. Whatever was following me sped away after the screw at rapid speed, snarling and breathing extremely heavy. I hurried back upstairs as quickly and quietly as possible. As soon as my foot rested on the top step, I heard it call out to me one last time.
Andrew, come here, buddy. Why are you hiding from me?
I had to find a way out of here. I passed by a classroom and the door was propped wide open. I was hesitant to enter because it should have been closed and locked according to the lockdown procedures. Teachers and other staff are supposed to close and lock all doors and windows in the entire building. But I decided to check it out anyway. Maybe someone had escaped from in there and they'd been in too much of a hurry to close the door. I peeked around the corner of the door on high alert, clutching the axe. Immediately after entering, I noticed that the teacher's desk was vibrating. I leaned over and found David crouched beneath it, shaking uncontrollably. "Why in the hell would you leave the door wide open?" I asked, dumbfounded. "I thought if I left it open, the shooter would see that nobody is in here and pass right by," he answered. "This door is the only one open in the whole school. I think it would thoroughly check this room, just like I did," I replied. "Yeah, I guess you're right," he said, embarrassed. "Hey, what do you mean by it?" he asked me. "Matt's dead. I saw something with tentacles push him down the stairs. And Mr. Klein had a huge gaping hole in his chest," I informed him. I began to gag just thinking about it. "So the shooter has a shotgun?" David assumed. Then I asked him, just like I asked Matt, "Bro, have you heard any gunshots this entire time?" "Well, I don't think so, but I was so sidetracked by all of the screaming. There could have been gunshots, and I just didn't hear them," he said. "What screaming?" I questioned. He told me that he'd heard screams coming from Mrs. Baker's classroom on the 3rd floor. "Julie's in there. We have to go find her," I said, beginning to panic. "I don't know if I can go back," David informed me. That caused me to lose it. "You piece of shit! That's your girlfriend and my sister up there. You didn't even try to save her." "Well, you're damn sure coming back up there with me now," I screamed at him in a loud whisper. When we reached the 3rd floor, I immediately cover my nose. The stench is overwhelming. The hall is covered with blood, and there are arms, legs, and other body parts strewn about, leading to random classrooms. A few of the classroom doors are open on this floor, and as I gaze inside, I see a pile of bodies stacked up in front of the blackboard. David is complaining the whole time about the smell, but I just block him out. The only thing I'm focused on right now is getting to my sister. My heart skips a beat as we approach the door to Julie's class at the end of the hall. There's blood leading from the hall into her classroom. I open the door, and there's a lot of blood in there too. David taps me on the shoulder and then points toward the front of the room. There are bodies piled up in here as well. I search the pile for her body, but it's not there. "She must be gone," I told David. "Or maybe she's one of those bodies piled up in one of the other classrooms. I'm not sticking around to look," he replied. I shoved him, and he flew across the room. "You coward! I can't believe Julie fell for you. She could do so much better," I said, throwing insult after insult. David stood up and replied, "Look, she might be my girlfriend, but I'm not ready to die for her, or anybody else." I pushed him again, and this time he ended up in the hallway. I was just about to punch his lights out when I heard the loud whispers again. "Pop, we went to the baseball game on Sunday. Don't you remember?" David asked. I crept farther back into Julie's classroom. A shadow snatched him by the leg and drug him away. I only heard his screams for a second, then they ceased abruptly. I don't know what happened to him, and I don't want to know. But when I saw the puddle of blood in front of the door, I panicked. The first thing that came to mind was that David had just been talking to his grandpa. Matt was pushed down the stairs by his brother, and I think Mr. Klein may have been begging his daughter not to kill him. But they were all dead. I know I'm on the 3rd floor, and that's 30 feet high, and I might end up with some broken bones, but at least I'll be outside. Anything was better than being in here with this thing. So I darted toward the window and jumped. The last thing I remember was crashing through some glass and then hearing a big splash and feeling very cold. I woke up thinking that my nightmare was finally over, but Lonely Larry was hovering over me in the school gymnasium. He explained to me that he was hiding in here when he heard a loud crash in the pool room. He told me that he had pulled me out of the pool and dragged me into the gym. I was getting ready to do CPR soon, he said with a smile. "Have you seen Julie?" I asked. He told me that he hadn't. "Well, can you help me find her?" I questioned. "Sure," Larry replied.
Andrew.
I heard the same voice from earlier, calling my name again. I told Larry to run and hide, but he just looked at me confused. When we saw the shadow fast approaching, I ran one way and Larry ran the other. I ended up behind the retractable bleachers, and he jumped into a bin holding basketballs. It made its way to the bleachers, calling out to me the whole time. No way, I thought to myself when I finally saw it walking towards me.
Andrew, come here, man. You never said goodbye.
Duncan said to me. Duncan was my best friend. Our junior year for skip day, I had talked his brother into buying us some beer because Duncan was too scared to do it. I was surprised when he actually agreed. While drinking, we drove around all day. Later that night, we decided to go to the movies. We snuck some more beers into the theater, and by the time the movie was over, we were really messed up. On the way home, I fell asleep in the back seat. I woke up to my head smashing against the seat in front of me. I saw Duncan's brother in the driver's seat, covered in blood, with his face crammed into the airbag. Duncan should have been in the passenger seat, but he wasn't there. I found out the next day at the hospital that he had been flung from the vehicle straight into a telephone pole. He died at the scene. His brother is serving 10 years in prison for vehicular homicide.
Andrew.
He called again. I didn't want to go, but something was pulling me right to him. It's like I couldn't control my body. It had total control over me.
Why did you tell him to get the drinks? I told you I didn't want them.
Duncan said to me. I didn't know this was going to happen, I uttered. Suddenly, something snapped me out of my daze. It was Larry, pushing the bleachers closed on the thing. I dashed out of there and headed straight for the door. I was nearly there when I heard Larry screaming for help. I looked back and saw that he was being held hostage in one of the thing's tentacles. I paused for a second, searching the gym for a weapon to fight back. My eyes settled on the bin full of basketballs, but it was too late. A calm and peaceful look spread across Larry's face. "Oh my God, August Ames? Is that really you? I miss you so much," he said. When he said the name, it rang a bell. I knew I'd heard it before, but I couldn't remember where. I raced over to Larry and grabbed a hold of his hand. I at least had to try to save him. I pulled with all of my strength, but its tentacles pulled harder. This thing was really strong. When Larry saw that I was getting nowhere, he told me with a smile, "It's okay," as he calmly let go of my hand. I ran out of there as fast as I could. My mind kept going back to the name Larry had said. I just couldn't figure out where I'd heard it before. Then it hit me. You've got to be shitting me. A porn star was the closest person to him? I guess Lonely Larry was lonelier than I thought. August Ames committed suicide last year after being cyberbullied. Maybe that was why Larry connected with her, because they were both victims of bullying. If only he made it, we could have been friends. After all, he saved my life. I can't believe he died for a piece of make-believe tale. As I raced upstairs, the shadow was right behind me. Whispers surrounded me. I didn't know where I was headed. I just screamed for help, hopeful that someone, anyone would hear me. The last thing I recall is running towards the entrance door, and when something came busting through them, I knew that thing was coming for me. I saw a bright white light, and then everything went black. I woke up in an ambulance. My mom was sitting next to me. "Are you okay?" she asked. "What happened?" I questioned as I rubbed the gash above my left eyebrow. "When the police finally busted through the door, it swung back off the hinge and knocked you out. You have multiple concussions," she informed me. I looked over and noticed my sister Julie sitting next to her. A wave of relief came over me seeing her face. "Thank God you made it out of there. I was looking everywhere for you," I said to her. "I was never in there. I skipped today. Me and Melanie went to the mall. I saw what happened on the news at the restaurant we were eating lunch at, so I rushed down here." "Where's David?" she asked. I shrugged my shoulders. I couldn't bear to tell her that he was dead. When I arrived at the hospital, I was put into a room with the only other survivor, Mr. Kenny. Mr. Kenny is a janitor at the school. He only had minor injuries from being knocked down and trampled when everything began. He told me that he'd hidden in the janitor's closet. Damn, we should have just stayed there. Then Matt and David would still be alive, I thought to myself. The nurse finished checking my blood pressure, and then she tells me that the doctor will be in shortly to see me. Once she's gone, Mr. Kenny starts rambling on about when he was in the Navy. I was used to it. He would always tell the students his old war stories. "I've seen this happen before. Did I ever tell you that my uncle was also in the Navy? He and other friends of mine were scattered throughout a fleet of ships heading out on a mission. There was a bad storm, and the ship he was on malfunctioned and began to sink. Everyone on board drowned. Then a month later, we were all still grieving the deaths of our brothers when something attacked the ship that I was on. I hid under the bunk in my cabin while my roommate called out to his wife who'd passed away years before. Then he was dragged away by something. I made my way up to the deck, and it was the same thing happening up there. The sailors were calling out to our dead brothers who drowned on my uncle's ship a month earlier. I was lucky to make it onto a raft. Then the voice of my uncle began calling to me. As I was lowering the raft, I saw him standing at the edge of the boat, staring at me and calling my name. With the last ounce of willpower I had left, I let go of the pulley and the raft dropped into the ocean. It killed everyone who was on the ship. It killed them all. I was the only survivor. I think it has to do with when there is too much grief in one place. It's drawn to it, and it not only feasts off that person's grief, it feasts on them. Subscribe for a new story Mondays, Wednesdays, and don't forget Saturdays. See you next time on
Gina's Nightmares.
Really? You're supposed to click the like button, not me. Ugh.